Hello, and welcome to another episode of Nationalist Radio America for the week of November 1st, 2017. This week, I was banned from the Donald subreddit. Why, you ask? What rule might I have broken? What sort of vile hatred might I have spewed that was so despicable that warranted a ban for one of only 3 posts I have ever made in that subreddit? I posted the following picture, showing the 2016 election turnout by race and gender. Now I want to let this sink in for a moment, and I want to contextualize for you, the viewer, the conversation that was had leading up to the ban. A person named Bay Orangutan said, quote, "My desire to protect my country's traditions, culture, and values is unrelated to my race. I can only speak for myself, but IMO, this sub, is here to support those things and our president. I think we should be welcoming of every citizen who holds those values. It doesn't matter what you look like." I responded, and I said, "Do you think that minorities on a national level represent conservative Republican interests? Think carefully. It's time we had a real discussion about the voting patterns of minorities. As much as I want to say they are secretly part of the MAGA train, you have to consider that they overwhelmingly vote against Republicans time and time again." A person named Cyrus, with a Gadsden flag as his flair, says, "When you open your heart to patriotism, there is no room for prejudice." It's a nice line. I replied, "When you open your eyes to reality, there is no room for feelings." I then posted the following picture. Here it is. So now, as a result of my ban, we're going to have a conversation with the viewers about the Donald and the myth or religion of the secret-based conservative non-white. The Donald, for those that don't know, is a pro-Trump, pro-Israel, pro-legal immigration subreddit that believes in magic American soil. It believes that as long as you adopt our values, that anyone is welcome here. What it refuses to acknowledge on a cultural level is that time has shown that no one accepts white Western values except white Westerners. So let's get into that. Prior to the Civil Rights Movement, and even during the Civil Rights Movement, beginning in 1954 and ending in 1968, the racial makeup of the United States was 85% white, 10% black, 4% Mexican, and 1% Asian and other. America had reached, just prior to the Civil Rights Movement and the forced desegregation of their society, something of a racial harmony with blacks. They smoked the same cigarettes, drove the same cars, black churches emulated white churches, black birth rates were similar to whites, black names were similar to white names, and unique names or black names, even though they still existed, were a significant minority. And even the way blacks dressed was in line with societal norms of the time, regardless of social class. It was in this time period that blacks also became the most conservative voters that they had ever been, with 39% of blacks voting Republican in 1956 and 32% of blacks voting Republican in 1960. After the Civil Rights Movement, the black family was decimated and out-of-wedlock births skyrocketed to an absolutely unsustainable level. And in today's world, 92% of black children are born without a father. Unique names that were distinctly not European in origin, including given slave names and Islamic names, as well as vanity names like Chanel and Adonis, almost immediately skyrocketed and became the most popular names for anyone of African descent. Names like Darnell and DeAndre took the top of the list and, in fact, remained there. Toward the end of the Civil Rights Movement in 1964, only 6% of blacks voted Republican, a trend which has continued to present day and shows absolutely no signs of slowing. Further, as a result of the Civil Rights Movement, Islam became widely adopted by African communities nationwide. Suddenly, blacks began to self-segregate rather than be forced to, and their culture in many ways got a mind of its own. They now smoke Newports, whereas whites smoke Marlboros. They dress in different clothing. They watch different television channels, patronize different businesses. Historically black churches vote in ways that are distinctly anti-Republican. Black culture has become its own self-sustaining creature, and blacks no longer needed to try to conform. Fatherlessness has become a staple of black culture, gang culture, promiscuity. Indeed, rampant casual sex amongst the black population is such a crisis that 54% of African American women have herpes, according to one study. STDs abound in the black community due to unsafe sex practices. All of this happened after the Civil Rights Movement and the Black Empowerment Movement. The trends from the 1960s in black communities have continued, and we've scarcely ever been more divided as a nation in regards to racial harmoniousness. It goes without saying that the Hart-Celler Act of 1965 served also to destabilize and exacerbate these problems by introducing practically overnight millions upon millions of Mexicans, Asians, and Arabs into the mix. In just 50 years, the Mexican population of the United States went from 4% to 16%. It's even higher now, a literal quadrupling, while whites and blacks remain roughly the same ratio compared to each other. If current trends continue, whites and blacks both will be displaced, and in 2060, whites will make up 43% of the country, blacks will make up 13%, Mexicans 31%, Asians 8%, and other 6%. Why is this a problem for the white Republican, you might ask? Thought we were talking about voting and the myth of the natural conservative. It sounds like you're just upset you're going to be a minority. Hey, straw man, that's a good point. I'll tell you why now. After the Civil Rights Movement, minorities have overwhelmingly voted against Republican interests, and it has always been like this. Conservative Republican values, traditionalism, religion, moderation, gun rights, freedom of speech, and all the other wonderful ideas that our country is founded on, all are white Western values. And I'll prove it. In a 2012 exit poll from the Huffington Post, using sources CNN, Fox, MSNBC, and again this is in 2012, whites, 62% Republican, 35% Democratic. White women, 56% Republican, 42% Democratic. Non-whites, black men, 11% Republican. Black women, 3% Republican. Latino men, 33% Republican. Latino women, 23%. All other non-whites, 31% Republican. In a joint Center for Political and Economic Studies graph made by factcheck.org, in 1936, 71% of the black vote was Democratic. You can see in 1960, as I said before, the most, or almost the most conservative blacks have ever been. And in 1964, skyrocketed. Just skyrocketed, and has remained high ever since, with the 2004 election, only 11% of blacks voting for the Republican candidate. In a graph from Black Demographics, the same is true. The exact same study actually talks about this, and it's just displayed a different way. Even though blacks overwhelmingly, even though blacks say that they are more Republican, their votes speak for themselves. In 1964, 8% of blacks said that they were Republican, but only 6% voted Republican. In 1960, 22% said that they were Republican, and 32% voted Republican. In 2012, 16% said that they were Republican, but only 6% actually voted Republican. From a national election pool exit poll from 2012 and 2016, whites in 2012, 51% Republican, 44% Democratic, and 4% other. In 2016, 48% white vote was to Republican, 43% was to Democratic, and 9% was other. I have a hard time believing this one actually, because too many other places contradict this, but even so, African American, 91% of the vote went to the Democratic candidate in 2012. In 2016, 83%. Latinos, 74% in 2012 went to Democrats, 70% in 2016. In another National Election Day exit poll data study collected by Edison Research, the same is true over and over and over. From USA Today, 2016 election exit polls, 70% of white turnout. 58% voted Donald Trump, 37% voted Hillary Clinton. For whites, blacks, 88% Hillary Clinton, 8% Donald Trump. Latinos, 65% Hillary Clinton. Asians, 65%. Other race, 56% Hillary Clinton. I mean, it's just every single time. From the Roper Center at Cornell U in 2000, African Americans, 90% to Gore. Hispanics, 62% Democrat, Gore. Asians, 55% Democrat, Gore. 2004, African Americans, 88% Democrat, Kerry. Hispanics, 53% Democrat, Kerry. Asians, 56% Democrat, Kerry. Other non-white, 54% Democrat. 2008, African American, 95% Obama. Hispanic, 67% Obama. Asian, 62% Obama. Other non-white, 66% Obama. Whites in the 2008 election were 74% represented, and 55% went to McCain. In 2012 election, white vote, 72% turnout. Romney, which was the Republican candidate, 59% Republican. Obama, 39% white vote. African American, 93%. 93% Democrat turnout. Hispanic, 71% Democrat. Asian, 73%. Other non-white, 58%. 2016. I mean, are you starting to get the point here? 2016, whites, 58% Trump. And this is from Cornell U, so I would trust this a lot more than the other source that I have. USA Today. Trump, white vote, 58%. Clinton, 37%. African American, Clinton, 88%. Hispanic, 65% Democrat. And this doesn't include Asians and other minorities, I imagine, because it's that information hasn't been compiled yet. And people, this goes all the way back to, I mean, antiquity here. I mean, you can go as far back as you want. From a Gallup poll, 2000 to 2004, whites, including Hispanics, well, let's not even bother with that. Non-white, 87% Democratic, 9% Republican in 2000. 2004 election, non-white, 83% Democratic, 17% Republican. Non-Hispanic white, almost the exact opposite, 42% Democratic, 56% Republican. In 2004, 43% Democratic, 57% Republican. I mean, black votes, 95% Democratic and 3% Republican in the 2000 election. In 2004, 93% Democratic, 7% Republican. And this is from Gallup. So how do gays, for example, vote? How do the LGBTQAIP plus group vote? In 2012, 76% Democratic. In 2016, 78% Democratic. All the way back to 2000, it's the same thing. 2000, 71% Democrat. 2004, 77. 2008, 70. 2012, 76. 2016, 78 people. It's just incredible. Now, maybe all of that wasn't enough for you. Maybe you think that these people are secret conservative Republicans and that the Republican Party has just put to the fore some really bad candidates and that these people actually believe in Republican values. Let's see how the racists vote on issues instead. On making hate speech a criminal offense, that is, by actually putting into law a crime that creates a legal definition for hate speech. White Americans oppose it, 43%. Black Americans support it, 62%. Hispanic Americans support it, 50%. What about gun control? Surely they believe that you should be able to own guns, right? It's in the Second Amendment, for God's sake. It's black and white. Well, you'd be wrong. Whites support the right to own firearms, 54%. Blacks oppose it, 66%. Hispanics oppose it, 75%. What about the party affiliation on gun control? Republican identified, 70% say protect the gun rights. Democrat, 67% control gun rights. According to an even more recent Pew Research poll done in just August of 2016 to prove that this is a trend and not a fluke, Asians, 77% control gun rights. Black, 73% control. Hispanic, 69% control. White, 55% protect. In a Pew Research study done from 2012, would you prefer a smaller government with fewer services or a bigger government with more services? Hispanics, 73% bigger government. Africans, 64% bigger. Asians, 55% bigger. Whites, 62% smaller. In another study about banning hate speech, whites, 43% oppose. Africans, 62% support. Hispanics, 50% support. For Hispanic voters to dispel the idea that they are natural conservatives. This is from a Stefan Molyneux video that talks about this issue, though I'm providing plenty of other sources where you can find the exact same information. First generation Hispanics, 63% Democrats. Second generation, 71% Democrat. According to a 2012 Pew Research survey on Hispanics, supporting a smaller or larger government. First generation Hispanics, 81% support larger government. Second, 72%. Third generation and higher, 58% support a larger government. In a Pew Research study done in 2015, historically black churches vote against every other Christian denomination on every issue, including political affiliation. Well, that's not entirely true. They also are sort of lukewarm on homosexuality and abortion, and that's in line, but they're very lukewarm, so it's not like they take a big stance on it either way. For smaller government, historically black churches supported smaller government only 18% in 2007 and only 23% in 2014. Well, maybe they'll be in line with other churches and other denominations on government aid to the poor. Not even close. Historically black churches say at a rate of 66% that aid to the poor is better than it is worse, compared to Christians at large who say at the absolute highest, at a rate of only 46%, that government aid to the poor is more good than harm. Well, maybe they'll be in line on immigration. No. 25% believe it has been changed for the better. 42% say it hasn't made much of a difference. Compare that to the view of evangelical Protestants who say at a rate of 48% that immigration is worse. About half of Muslims and Hindus say also that immigration is a change for the better. I wonder why. So with all of this said and out of the way, I ask you, viewer, if you believe in the fundamental rights granted to you by the Constitution, and if you believe even a little in the things that conservative Republicans do, why do we continue to prop up 10% of the population and parade them around as being so based when overwhelmingly their culture votes against us? Yes, I applaud every Mexican, Black, Asian, Native American, or LGBTQAIP+ person that votes against the trend. But it's time we have an honest discussion about how people vote and how, with a growing minority population in the United States, the right-wing vote is being diluted farther and farther to the point that the entire country will turn blue permanently. After the 1986 Immigration Reform and Control Act by Reagan, California was irrevocably turned blue. Not because its population changed its mind, but because demographics influenced the state's vote so much that it has never voted Republican since. No other ethnicity votes even remotely similar to whites. Not a single one. Not a single one is even close to the almost 50-50 spread that whites have. Not Native Americans, not Indians, not Jews, not Africans, not Hispanics, not Asians, not Arabs, not anybody. Nobody votes Republican at any considerable rate except whites. It's time we stop acting like right-wing values are not exclusive or almost exclusive to white people. And it's time we stop acting like the Republican Party is not the de jure party of white Western interests in America. I hope you, the Donald, and mainstream conservatives pay attention instead of banning an uncomfortable truth, because demographics are destiny.